guys, it's Danny. Today we are going to talk about NoID orchids, sometimes also called NoID orchids. How did they manage to become nameless, and what does it actually mean for us home growers and professional growers such as hybridizers? Before that though, let's just start with the most awesome news. Many of you might know already, throughout December, we had a fundraiser campaign. We put out a brand new line of merch, which you can see on me. All proceeds went to Doctors Without Borders, but not only. Our collaborators for the past more than 2 years at this point, rePotme.com promised to match 10% of everything we gather and donate separately as well. Well, my friends, today it is time to see how much we as a community managed to raise for people in medical need all around the world. Are you guys ready? I have my numbers here. I will have to do some math. Okay, so from the merch campaign, we managed to gather $3,060, which were directly donated from Teespring to Doctors Without Borders, and they were donated already, which I have to say is incredible. I get goosebumps. I cannot believe that we managed to gather so much money. So I really hope that when you're looking at your mug, your hoodie, your mask, whatever you ordered, I really hope you do remember that you just helped somebody, and that's wild, isn't it? But Ben from rePotme also decided that 10% maybe not enough. Let's make it 15%. So they've also donated $459, and you will see a screenshot on the screen right now. They actually made it an e-card tribute gift on the name MissOrchidGirl, which, by the way, you guys, it's not my name. It's our name, it's our community's name, if you will. So that was absolutely fantastic. I was very touched by that. And also we separately donated $250 at the beginning, plus of course we got merch. I got merch for my parents, for my boyfriend's parents, for my team. Yes, we do have a small team now, and actually we made all of this happen together with my team, which is actually family and friends as well. So overall, let's just make a little calculation because I'm not good at math on the go. Overall, us together as a community, and I will include rePotme here because they are wonderful persons, really, we managed to gather at least $3,769. And if you guys donated directly as well, maybe you decided you don't actually want merch, but you do want to donate directly, then it's even more than that. And that is absolutely wonderful. I'm so happy and so proud of our community. And before I get too emotional, I just want to say thank you guys so much for participating. If you couldn't participate, that is okay. It's hard times for everybody, really. I do want to make a yearly thing out of this campaign, and also I think I'm gonna just put a percentage out of my merch that I already have. That will go to charity as a default. I think that's great, and I think we are in a time of history where everybody can use a bit of help. So, with that said, I think it's time to start today's subject. Don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it, and why not subscribe? I post 3 times a week when I will get into my routine after the holidays. So that said, let's start. Alright, so first off, what are NoID orchids? And PS, if you notice the setup changing a little bit, well, that's because I'm actually filming in a different day. I decided to redo this part, which happens sometimes. If I don't like what I did, I'm just gonna redo it. So, no ID or no identification orchids are those orchids which simply have no name. And the most notorious no ID orchids on the market have to be the flower shop Phalaenopsis orchids. Both the miniatures, like the one I have here, and also the standard ones. Now, this doesn't mean that the orchids really have no name. They actually might, but they're just not provided with a tag specifying their name, such as this Phalaenopsis. This is not a flower shop Phalaenopsis. It has been ordered from a nursery, and you can see that I do actually have a name tag here which specifies the name and also the nursery it's coming from. So this is not a no ID, it is actually the Phalaenopsis Zengmin Anaconda Yafon, which is absolutely beautiful. But if this one did not have a tag, I wouldn't know what it was, so it would actually be a no ID. But who decides this name? Well, in this case, a hybridizer, because this is a hybrid orchid, it is not a species. And as it just so happens, there is an authority approving orchid names, not only hybrids, but also species. And there is a registry available on the internet that we can all access and have a look at orchid names. And not only, I do believe there are other plants registered there as well. I will link you down below to it. It is the RHS registry, and there you will find all of the orchid species and hybrids that we currently know about, that have been discovered or obtained and registered. So if you take a look on that register, not only will you find the proper name of the orchid, but also the year it has been registered and the person or company or nursery that registered it. You will also find specified there the two parents that were combined to obtain that hybrid. Sadly, there is no family tree, but there is another website on the internet, which again is free, called Orchid Roots, it used to be Blonanta, which puts together in a database the whole family tree of an orchid. So I'll link you both of these websites below because they're just fun to see. The Orchid Roots website has pictures as well, which will further give you a glimpse on how the parentage looks like and the possible varieties that there might exist in cultivation. So pretty easy. An orchid that does not have any name tag is a no ID. An orchid that has a name tag, it's an identified orchid. But as I was saying, even no IDs can have names, and this is where the detective work starts. As far as my knowledge goes, there is no website on the internet which is free and accessible by everybody that helps you identify what you have. Not even the Orchid Roots website. That website is mainly used to learn about the parentage. Obviously, you can choose an orchid and go through all of its hybrids, which are listed, but some orchids have hundreds of hybrids. So even if you have a suspicion your orchid might be related to another orchid, it's still not a very efficient way to go about it. So I'll tell you really fast what I try to do to identify my orchids, which in most cases actually works. I do actually have a video about it, but it's so old at this point that I'm just gonna summarize it yet again in this video. First and foremost, I use the browser of my choosing, which is Google, and start searching. I start with what I see. Especially if an orchid is in bloom, it's much easier to identify. Now, because I already have some knowledge about orchids, I can tell that this orchid is in the Oncidium alliance. It's definitely not a Phalaenopsis or a Cattleya or a Vanda, so I will start with the name Oncidium. Even though this particular one is an Alisara, I'm just gonna start with the closest thing that I have. So I'm gonna type Oncidium, then I'm gonna look at the flower. First of all, what is the shape of it? It looks a bit like a star to my eyes, right? So I'm just gonna type that in, Oncidium star shape. Then I'm gonna look at the color. It is a white buttery color with some burgundy in it. So I will go ahead and further type white with burgundy flower. And Google will show me some results. I'm gonna look at the pictures rather than text. And I'm gonna go through all of the images that Google shows me. And if I find even one which comes close to the orchid that I have, I'm going to click on it. And then I'm going to see the related pictures. See if anything can come even closer or even show me the orchid that I have. Most often than not, I will eventually reach the orchid that I'm looking for. And when I reach a picture which looks almost or completely identical to the orchid that I have, then of course I'm gonna go to the text option and I'm gonna see what name corresponds to that image. Then to double check, I will Google again that name and see what images result from my search. And if they happen to be the same image with my orchid, then hey presto, I just identified my orchid. Now, this is a simplified version of it. In reality, the process is a little bit more complicated. It takes a little bit more time depending on the orchid I'm looking for. There are some orchids which are just iconic in my opinion, like the Nelly Eiler. If you search red Cambria orchid, which Cambria is a name for the Oncidium intergenerics here in Europe, I think one of the first searches will be the Nelly Eiler. There aren't many orchids which happen to look like the Nelly Eiler, which happen to be red and which happen to be Cambrias. So some searches will be faster and more fruitful than others. Other times I search for an orchid for months on end and I go from picture to picture and it just happens one day out of pure luck to find the orchid that I'm looking for. Other times I never find it, and sometimes it happens that the orchid that I'm looking for has not been registered just yet. The only exception that I can think of is the mass-produced Phalaenopsis hybrids, which sometimes don't even get registered because nurseries are not really keen on quote-unquote making history in that way. So they just sell them under no name whatsoever or under a commercial name. So let's talk a little bit about the commercial name. We call commercial names those orchid names which can sometimes appear on tags which are actually not present in the RHS registry. And these names usually are given by the orchid nursery, which typically mass produces the orchid. Phalaenopsis orchids, because they're mass produced, are notorious to having commercial names and many of the times no registered names. Also, Dendrobium phalaenopsis are in the same category. They are mass produced. I'm showing you an example of one of my favorite ones. This is Dendrobium White Surprise. If you look on the registry, you will not find this orchid. Sometimes you will actually find the name, but it happens to be a totally different orchid. So for these reasons, commercial names are not considered official names. Sometimes orchids which have commercial names do have a registered name as well. Sometimes it can be the same, or it can allude to it, or it can be totally different. This is really up to the nursery. There is no orchid police, let's call it like that, saying, hey, you're not allowed to use a different name, as far as I know at least. So commercial names are not official names, but we still use them just to provide information about these particular orchids, especially if they are commonly available in multiple regions of the world. How else will people find information about those orchids if not using at least the commercial name? Finding the commercial names is pretty easy. You can go the route of what I just told you earlier and describing the flowers, Googling it, trying to do that detective work, or you can actually find the name of the nursery on your tag. If you have the name, sometimes there will be no name. Go to the nursery and see if on their website they do have names for the variety of orchids they're selling. Some of them do, like Inca Orchids, Sanook Nurseries, which is where this Dendrobium is coming from. They have their varieties named there. The White Surprise is one of their varieties. That's where I got the name from, but I don't know if this orchid is actually registered. There's no way that I can find out, since it's a white Dendrobium orchid. And there are so many white Dendrobium orchids, it's very easy for me to make a mistake. Which leads me to the next chapter of identifying orchids. What if we make mistakes? Are there any potential bad outcomes? Of course there are, so let's talk about those. Now, knowing the name of orchids is important for some people and maybe not so important for others. For you as a home grower, it might not matter at all if you have just a few Phalaenopsis orchids, and if you feel like giving your NoID orchid a name, you can call it Bill, Bob, Samantha. It's okay. I actually have a few viewers telling me they do name their orchids like this, and that's perfectly fine. For me and other growers which make videos, write articles, have Instagram profiles, it is actually very important to know the names of these orchids because, well, obviously, it helps us provide information on specific orchids. If one of you guys has a Nellie Eiler, how will you find information about your orchid? Well, you will go on Google or your search engine of choice and type in Oncidium or Oncidopsis Nellie Eiler and see what information pops up. Well, if I, as a creator of content, don't provide the name of that orchid, I'm just titling my video, How to Care for This Red Orchid, chances are somebody looking for information on the Nellie Eiler will not find my video, which might actually be what they're looking for. Also, I might present orchids which my viewers don't have or didn't know existed, and they would like to acquire them themselves. How will they search for them at their local nurseries? If you go to a nursery website and you type in orchid that has yellow, purple color, is a vanda, and has many tiny flowers, you'll probably not find anything because that's not how searches work. You will have to know the name of the orchid in order for you to find it at specific nurseries. First, it is important to know the proper name of orchids so that the people who want to acquire those orchids or who are looking for information, they can easily relate to the video, find the video, get the information they need, and then do what they want to do with that information. but because we're all humans, we are also prone to making mistakes. And especially if we are at the beginning of our orchid journey, when our eyes are not really used to looking at all of the details. Orchids are just such a diverse group of plants that the differences between them can sometimes be minimal. And trying to identify something might actually lead you to another orchid which might look similar, but it's not actually the orchid you have. So because the chances of getting an ID wrong exist and are bigger than you actually imagine, there is a bit of a moral dilemma in identifying orchids on your own. Some people consider it's wrong, some people consider it doesn't really matter. Because the problem is, if you want to enter into a contest an orchid, you have to know its correct name. Or at least to my knowledge, I'm not into contests, but from what I hear from you guys and from other people who are actively growing their orchids for shows and contests. So imagine this. You acquire an orchid from a source with an ID, you grow that orchid beautifully, it flowers, it's an amazing, amazing show, and you think, this orchid could actually win a competition, and that would make me so happy. And you go with that orchid to the judging table, and the judges from the get-go shut you down, saying that the ID is wrong because the orchid has some major differences that disqualify it from the contest. Wouldn't you be heartbroken? I would certainly be if I grew that orchid for that specific reason. And then for hybridizers to acquire orchids that don't have proper IDs, it's even worse because you are trying to register a hybrid, you are pretty much trying to make history, right? And then you discover that the whole family tree is wrong, so you cannot register your orchid because you have no parentage for it in order to register it. So you're stuck with a beautiful hybrid you created that you cannot really trademark, you cannot really do anything with in regards to registering. You can see how acquiring mislabeled orchids can be very detrimental to some people. So I can fully understand why some people oppose so much the idea of identifying your orchids yourself. Even if you have an orchid from a reputable nursery and it has a proper tag, doesn't necessarily mean the orchid you have is what it says on the tag, sadly. And mislabeled orchids are more common than they should be, in my opinion. And here's an example. I have quite a few of them, actually. This is the one that's in bloom. I purchased this orchid from a reputable seller. It came with a tag. It says Epidendrum prismatocarpum. Ooh, well, somebody likes this orchid. There you are. You wanted to see it closer? You don't need it. No, don't need it. Okay, so the tag of this orchid says prismatocarpum crossed with vitellina. So it's supposed to be a primary hybrid between these two species. Now, being that I do have some experience with orchids and I have a visual image of many of the species and hybrids popular in cultivation, I can tell you that the tag is wrong just by looking at the flowers. If you Google the two parents, you will see that there are some major structural differences between the flowers of the parents and the flowers of this orchid. So sometimes it happens that mislabeled orchids come directly from the nurseries, not from people identifying their orchids themselves. And if you are one of those persons who really doesn't care all that much about the full name of an orchid, but you at least would like to know the basic of identification, you'd like to know if your orchid is a Phalaenopsis or a Vanda or Oncidium, I do actually have a very beginner-friendly tutorial. I will link you to it down below, which will give you the visual cues for the most popular types of orchids we can grow in our homes. So if you are a very early beginner, check that video out. I'm sure it will help you out. And I will also link you down below to the Orchid Roots website and the RHS website. I personally find it very fun to learn about the whole family tree of an orchid, as I showed you in my previous video. So if you like these things, do check the description down below. And with that said, I do believe it is time to end the video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, thank you so much for participating in the Orchids at Heart campaign, which will be a yearly thing. I do want to do it yearly. And I do hope you enjoy the merch that you got. I enjoy mine, especially because the design was made by my boyfriend. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And with that said, I'll see you next time. Bye!